Hello, I'm Paul Bradshaw.
And I'm Lauren Gray. Welcome to Viral History, your weekly internet-based fix of history-based ephemera.
Coming up on this week's show, I sit down with Anglo-Saxon historian and writer Dr. Ryan Lavelle.
And we get another eye-opening glimpse into Tudor surgery. But first up, let's get some history news.
An archaeological find on Staffordshire farmland is believed to include the earliest examples of Iron Age gold ever discovered in Britain. The Leek Frith Iron Age talks were discovered by metal detectorists just before Christmas and could date back as far as 400 BCE. A bronze sword given to a ship's captain for his exploits at the Battle of Trafalgar is to be auctioned in the US. The rare 212-year-old 100 guinea sword was awarded to Captain William Rutherford for his role in helping the British to victory. And archaeologists from Molar have discovered 81 coffins of early Christians in Norfolk. The extremely rare examples of tree trunk burials at Great Ryborough date from the 7th to the 9th centuries.
Hi, I'm Nicola Tallis and you're watching Viral History.
Next up, Dr. Ryan Lavelle is reader in early medieval history, fittingly enough, at the University of Winchester.
His expertise is late Anglo-Saxon political history, and he used this expertise to great effect as historical advisor on the BBC series The Last Kingdom.
With the second series soon to air on BBC Two, Viral History had great fun in talking to him about the so-called Dark Ages.
So Ryan, why are you so fascinated by this period of English history?
This period is really fascinating because we're engaging with a place that many of us know, the places that many of us know, the places in England and the places in Britain and Europe more broadly, and seeing a different aspect of them. We're seeing these places inhabited by different people from 20, 30 generations ago, and sometimes with very different values from what we expect to be our own. They've got values, but their habits, their modes of behaviour often differ. And there's a degree of escapism as well, and I think that was something that always appealed to me as, dare I say it, like many early medievalists, I was a fan and still am a fan of the works of Tolkien, and that sort of sense of a different landscape was always appealing to me as a child. And then when I discovered that so much of that landscape was based on the early Middle Ages, and it's got this sort of rich texture of links in the early Middle Ages themselves, then it sort of really helps us to populate that landscape. That landscape comes alive there, and it's just such a pleasure to travel around outside Winchester and see these names of small villages that are there in Domesday Book and there in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle and so on. And it's part of a landscape that is other, but is also ours as well.
You talked there about the landscape of Anglo-Saxon England, and it was a landscape that was threatened many times by the Vikings. What impact do you think the Vikings had on Anglo-Saxon England?
A serious impact on Anglo-Saxon England from the late 8th century, from the 790s, where there's a raid of ships in Northumbria, but they're also down in the south of England. And at that point, they're just sporadic raids. They're smash and grab raids. They're raiding places where there is easily available loot, and that frightens writers, that frightens Christian writers of the period, because the Vikings aren't conforming to normal expected rules of behaviour. It was expected that aristocrats, who were warrior aristocrats in Anglo-Saxon England, would be Christian, and they would respect Christian places, or they might not respect the lands of Christian churches, but they would at least respect the churches themselves. And the Vikings change that. They change it, and they change it with their mobility. The fact that their ships move and they come again, they move away and then they come again, and they use rivers to come inland and move rapidly inland, unexpectedly in some cases. Although I suspect for some of the local people seeing a ship coming upriver, it takes a little while to come upriver, but nonetheless it's that kind of fear of the dragon ships attacking, I think, is a major thing there. And it shifts things, and eventually, by the later 9th century, it means that a number of the native Anglo-Saxon rulers are no more. That they've been disposed of by Vikings, and Vikings take over those kingdoms. They effectively begin to become part of the political systems of Anglo-Saxon England after that, and it sort of changes the political makeup of England, of what becomes England.
What do you think it was that defined an Anglo-Saxon ruler?
Anglo-Saxon rule is based on expressions of kingship, of a defined authority of a ruler, about the acceptance of somebody as a ruler. So a ruler can't rule without a degree of consent from at least the nobility around them. It's based on war leadership as well. An Anglo-Saxon king doesn't always have to be a warrior, but they have to be perceived as a warrior in order to rule. But balanced with that is the Christian perception of rulership. And increasingly, as we move towards the late Anglo-Saxon period, there's a sense of rulers as anointed by God through increasingly elaborate liturgical ceremonies. And that's the kind of aura of kingship, which is important to their rule.
We think of the Anglo-Saxon period as a series of bloody coups and vengeful vendettas between cousins. How fair is it to think of this period in that way?
It's a colourful way of thinking of the period, and it has its fair share of bloody killings and political killings in many ways, and sometimes vengeful killings. But they are part of the picture, they're not the whole picture. And those political killings are undertaken in order to demonstrate something. Historians often talk about demonstrative violence, and that's one of those kind of actions of the time. And so that's on one side of things, that warfare happens, but it's controlled and it's within rules. Even the Vikings start to adapt to those rules. They adapt those rules and affect them, but they start to act according to them as well. And so that's the one hand. But the other thing that we should bear in mind is that this is a period with the creation of fabulous works of art, intricate works of art that represent thousands of hours of skilled men and women's time, from the embroidery of the period to manuscripts to sculptures in stone and in ivory, and that's kind of part of an elite culture in many ways, or a lot of it is part of an elite culture, although ordinary people as well are kind of part of that artistic world too. But those things that survive, that have come down to us, through a millennium, more than a millennium, are an incredible indication that this was a period of more than just blood and violence.
And recently you worked on the very successful BBC series The Last Kingdom, based on Bernard Cornwell's series of books. How was that experience, and what did you think of the finished product?
I loved the series. It was great, and it was great fun to work on the series. I mean, it's great to take an opportunity to do something different, and this was one of those ways in which I could think, well, this is something different. This is a way in which my impact, my work on warfare, my work on kingship, these things could actually feed in and inform the making of the production. Of course, they have their own agendas as a production team, and they want to tell a story above all, and I think that's important. And for me, I think that was what made it work, is that you can see, as you watch the series, you can see a story arc, you can see the narrative evolving, you can sort of see characters evolving, and you know, I was very proud to be part of that, and you know, occasionally inform them. And of course, you know, there are certain things that they wanted to do to give their own flavour to their version of the Viking Age, and I think that's legitimate. It's part of the storytelling of the past. It's not, you know, it's not history itself, but it's historical fiction in the tradition of sagas. Really, that's the thing. That people were doing this about the Vikings, or the descendants of Vikings were doing this about the Vikings in the 12th and the 13th centuries, and here we are in the 21st century, sort of retelling those stories with a twist. And for me, it was great that they actually bothered to ask somebody who has expertise in that area to give some advice about points, and it was great to see it being filmed at times as well. I saw a hall being burnt down. I mean, how many times does a historian get to see a hall in flames, and the exercise of ambushing a hall at night, going around the hall at night and setting it aflame, which is a wonderfully dramatic moment at the beginning of the first episode of the first series.
And what's next for Ryan Lavelle?
I've got a couple of projects on the boil at the moment that I'm working on. And one is a short introduction to the reign of Canute, which is a study of kingship, really, at a time when you have this Danish Viking who takes over the Anglo-Saxon kingdom and basically becomes an Anglo-Saxon king. And I'm sort of using that as an opportunity to think about aspects of Anglo-Saxon kingship and bringing in a few new ideas along the way. But the other project, which I'm really excited about, is looking at places of conflict and rebellion, and the use of places and the use of particular landscapes and the memory of landscapes in cases where you have nobles who come up against rulers and are trying to renegotiate their position, or pointing out that they are feeling aggrieved in some way. Discontented members of royal families using royal castles, for example, to make their political point. And I'm going slightly outside my comfort zone by looking across the Channel, not just at England before and just after the Norman conquest, but also across the Channel in Normandy and in northern France. And it's involving working with some sources that I haven't worked before, but it's opening out new comparative vistas as well for me.
Ryan, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
And Series 2 of The Last Kingdom airs on BBC Two this coming spring.
Next up on Viral History, we travel back to the 16th century once again with Hayley Considine in our new series about Tudor medicine as we make another visit to the surgeon's room.
Hello guys, and here we are in the surgeon's room again, and of course we are with the surgeon, Kevin Goodman, and we're going to be talking about one of our primary historical figures, Henry V, isn't it, Kevin?
Indeed we are.
Tell us about him.
Right. Now, a significant event in Henry's life occurred at the Battle of Shrewsbury in 1403. Now, at this battle, Henry Percy set out to try and take the throne from Henry IV. Henry's Prince Hal, as he was then, father.
And can I just confirm, this is pre-Agincourt?
This is pre-Agincourt, yeah. Agincourt's 1415, this is 1403. Battle of Shrewsbury. This was the first time Englishmen had used the bow against other Englishmen. So it really is a significant battle, because if Hotspur had won, then our course of history would have changed significantly. During the battle, 16-year-old Prince Hal who is leading a charge, is struck with an arrow that went in at the left side of his nose, straight in, and buried itself in his skull. Now, he managed, they actually finished they did finish the battle. Prince Hal carried on fighting to the end. Hotspur, in a strange quirk of fate, got killed when an arrow went straight through his mouth and into his head. Prince Hal survived. He was taken to Kenilworth Castle, where attempts by various surgeons were made to remove the arrow.
So he'd carried on fighting.
He carried on fighting
through his face.
Yeah. Even the chances are the arrow was snapped off, and he carried on. It's also possible because they don't really know that the shaft might have been pulled out. We don't know. However, he was taken to Kenilworth Castle, where various surgeons examined him to try and remove the arrow. Finally, the job fell to a guy called John Bradmore. Now, he was an interesting character, Bradmore. He'd already been on trial for suspected forgery, but he was a good surgeon. So he examined Prince Hal's wound. In fact, a lot of the details we get from the wound and the treatment come from Bradmore's book Philomena, meaning the nightingale. And what Bradmore found, that the arrow had gone in at an angle at the left side of the nose, and the arrow was embedded 6 inches and become embedded at the back of the skull. The fact, a sheer fact that Hal did not get injured, didn't get killed really, is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a quirk of fate, really. So, what Bradmore did, he took some little rolls of elder pith that were wrapped in linen and soaked in honey.
What's elder pith, sorry?
Elder, it comes from the middle of the elder tree.
Okay.
So he wrapped up, it's very delicate stuff. So he wrapped little rods in and inserted them to keep the wound open. Then he invented a wonderful device. This is everything that is right about medieval surgery. So,
I might take some convincing of that.
Trust me. Bear in mind, you've got a 16-year-old with an arrowhead embedded. If he dies, you're in trouble. So, if I could ask you to hold, so you can hold it between your thumb and your finger.
Yeah.
Right. The instrument, was introduced into the wound, straight down into the arrowhead. Now, what Bradmore is actually doing, he's applying the principles of arrow wound treatment dating back to the ancient Greeks. He's a good surgeon. He knows what he's doing. He's kept the wound open. He's followed the track of the wound to the arrow. Then, the pin is inserted, and as that goes down, the bottom opens, and then if you can just open your fingers, that allowed Bradmore to remove the arrowhead.
That's fascinating.
Well, the pith was inserted and just moved out gently again to let the wound heal, and was treated at regular times with various medications. The amazing thing is, this was rediscovered in the 1980s by Tig Lang, and it was remade by Hector Cole, who's an archaeological blacksmith. So it really is a piece of work to have that reconstructed, because Philomena did actually contain a picture. But that arrow wound did have a knock-on effect. My belief is, within the history of Henry, who Prince Hal went on to be, if you look at the histories of Shakespeare, they all go on about Prince Hal's change in behaviour when he took the throne. And it is my belief that the arrow wound actually contributed to that. We're not looking at something that happened instantly, but happened over a number of years. So we know from the various histories, Prince Hal went from being what we call one of the lads down the inns of Cheapside, enjoying himself with ladies of leisure, drinking. He became more religious.
Right.
He became severely religious in a way. He became such an extremist that was considered too far for 1403. Well, sorry, a bit later, for the 15th century really. He also lost his libido. His tempers became ferocious. He lost any sense of humour he got, and he would fall into reveries, what they describe as prayers, from which he couldn't be roused. Yeah. So, but if we match these today, they're actually symptoms of left temporal lobe damage. And my contention is that that wound may have been a bit of dirt, may have been a little bit of bone, actually became lodged in the left temporal lobe and produced long-lasting effects. Now, we know that these tumours grow over years. We know this from work done from the Vietnam War. It doesn't happen instantly, but it happens over a period of time. This doesn't mean he was necessarily a bad king, because we know that people can have brain injury and they are largely unaffected, apart from various other characteristics. So, it's, you know, as far as I'm concerned, it's logical. Often people will say, well, Henry wasn't hit on the left side, he was hit on the right side, because when you look at the portrait of him that is in the National Portrait Gallery, his left side doesn't show a blemish. Well, one, a painting is not a photograph, and the other thing is that painting was actually done in the 17th century.
So propaganda.
So, propaganda.
Possibly.
Yeah.
So could this explain the personality distortion then?
I believe so. One of the arguments has been that he was suffering some kind of post-traumatic syndrome, but yet his behaviour doesn't match PTSD. He was still aggressive. He didn't avoid war, we know that from Azincourt. But the funny thing is, when he went to Azincourt, he was wearing a bucket helmet that covered his whole face.
Right, okay. Oh, wow. Well, that was fantastic. So much information there as well. And something that I personally didn't know about, and I'm sure many viewers at home didn't know, that we all know him for Agincourt, don't we? So that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Kevin, for imparting all your knowledge with us. And thank you again for joining us, guys.
I'm suddenly so grateful for anaesthetic.
And antibiotics.
Perhaps Marguerite can take our mind off it.
"16th of March. I'm just going outside and maybe some time. The last words of Captain Lawrence Oates when he left his tent and disappeared into the Antarctic blizzard today in 1912.
Well, that's about it from us for this week.
Feel free to hit the subscribe button, follow Viral History on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, like this video, and tune in next week.
And remember, what's past is prologue.
See you in 7 days. Welcome to Viral History, your weekly internet-based fix of history. A fly just buzzed in my ear.
And he used this expertise to great effect as historical advisor on the BBC
History-based ephemera.
Oh, please say it like that. I love it.